When I was asked to be here and to put together a presentation, I thought, what better way to start a presentation than literally re-saying what I'm here to do. I am carving a career in coffee in the autumn weather in October in Chicago. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about my experience and what I've been through. And we're also going to talk about some other experiences that maybe we have observed and have been a part of. And then we're going to focus a little bit on what I think is a good roadmap to carving your own personal experiences too. I want to also take a minute to thank the BGA. It's been an organization that I've had a great relationship with for many years. I think I was member 113, 112, certainly not at the single digits, but pretty excited to be a part of that too. And of course, thank the SCAA, an organization that I hold very dear to my heart. It's an organization that I worked for several years, and we'll go into that in a little bit too. We're going to talk about me for just a little bit. Right now, I work for Intelligentsia Coffee. I'm the Vice President of Retail. I help support all of my stores and all of my teams, and I'm really excited to work with a great group of individuals every single day, too. I have a long spanning history in coffee. I'm an old hag in coffee. I've been around for a while. I'm also very blessed to know many of you in this room personally. I can call many of you my friends, and that's pretty great. It makes this presentation easy/horrifying, and Stephen Morris, you can save your comments for later too. Thanks. I'm also fortunate to have some outside perspective too. Prior to being in coffee and during my career in coffee, I've taken a little hiatus and been fortunate enough to have some careers that extend outside of coffee. We'll touch a little bit on that today too, but hopefully what that provides to you is a good rounded experience for things that you can apply today, both inside coffee and hopefully some perspective that falls outside of that too. So this is where we're going to talk a little about a career path. And I'd like to start with a comparison of career paths. And I'd like to start with something that maybe many of us in this room are very familiar with too. Let's start with our parents. So this is a typical set of parents right here. These just happen to be my parents as well, along with my two sisters. And of course, that dazzling young boy in the front row there too. Let's talk about our parents' careers. And let's not talk about anything that's crazy or Mark Zuckerberg or any of those crazy kind of career paths that maybe were just catapulted from a certain degree. Let's talk about something that maybe many of us are really familiar with, having grown up in your parents' career, having seen them go through a lot of their careers themselves. I think it's a good comparison to start with too. So let's start with where our parents were. First of all, they were born. It's pretty exciting, right? They quickly then went on to going into school, as all of us typically do. After that, of course, they attended college. Maybe they also picked up a trade. Maybe they immediately went from school into something that they were familiar with already, skills that they learned in school, or a trade that they learned in school and continued it on. And from there, they then go on to their first career. So we can see already that this is a fairly linear path, nice and straight, easy, straightforward. And then from that first career, typically, and after a long period of time, a nice, solid curve that goes all the way up to retirement too. So we see this, very linear, nice and straightforward, fairly predictable, somewhat uninteresting too. Let's also talk about some of our parents' career goals that they had. It was a career that they enjoy, sort of, maybe not always, too. Something that was important to them is certainly job security. They didn't want to have to come into work every day having to question, will I have my job tomorrow? Will I be laid off? Job security was very important to our parents, certainly my own parents, too. To my parents, particularly my mother, her career advancement over time was very important to her, that she would see a progression, that she would be able to kind of prove herself and really commit to the work that's in front of her, and to be able to be rewarded for that advancement over time. And of course, stable retirement was very important to our parents, whether that was via a pension. Pensions are somewhat unheard of these days, and certainly don't bring them up in Chicago, or a 401k plan as well too. So fairly straightforward goals, really being able to align to that career curve then too. I'd also like to take a modern day perspective of a career. And for that, I'd like to focus on myself. Let's look at my career path. What has my career path done? Obviously, I love getting in tuxes and making siphons, apparently, but that's fine. So let's look at my career path. I was born. Woohoo! From that point, I, of course, went on to school. Again, pretty straightforward, following the line of many of our parents or many other careers that we witnessed from there, too. From there, I went on to college, some college right off the bat, too. And from that point, I chose to take a career inside of retail and then moving on into the wireless industry, where I took on a sales position initially, really kind of getting some sales understanding, learning how to go out there and be hungry for sales as well, too. Again, mostly in the wireless industry. At that point, I put college on hold for a little bit longer while I focused on my career there. And then again, moving on to a further opportunity inside of the wireless industry, working on spectrum deployment, when the government lets go of airwaves so that you can operate your cell phones and use the data. We would go into new markets and really deploy that new spectrum that's engaged in new markets. Career number 2, inside of a leadership capacity, inside of a development role, really starting these new companies. And frankly, back in the heyday of wireless, when we were just switching over from analog to digital, a really exciting time that puts us in a great position where we are today. From that point, my partner, now husband, and I decided to move to Chicago to really take on a new and interesting career, going back into retail, but also having my first job in coffee, which was at Intelligentsia Coffee at our Broadway store, back in the day. This was certainly back when we used Swift grinders. I think they called it the Chicago chop, where we had the you know, Scott, yeah, the knife where you had to level out with this bottle opener. It was crazy, yeah. Things are really crazy, too. And then from that learning at Intelligentsia, becoming very passionate about coffee, clearly identifying that this was a career and this was an industry that I was excited to be a part of. I started to both put myself into the work and be recognized for that work that I was contributing to. So being asked to become the business manager for Intelligentsia Coffee, which had accounts receivable, accounts payable, HR-related functions, pulling from my professional experience, all while going to school a little bit here and there at the same time, too. And really starting to advance into coffee, where I then took over as head of retail operations at that time. Just one store, where we added a second, and then we added a third, and then grew into the Los Angeles market as well, too. So really excited to grow in my relationships there, to grow in my experience, and be a part of that, too. And again, more college over that fourth career, going into that head of retail. At that point, we're going to take a bounce back, where I was offered a career back into the wireless industry, back to my previous employer that had been reaching out to me and wanted to bring me back in to be a part of the new initiative, and certainly in the new era of smartphones emerging inside of the wireless industry. It paid a lot of money, too. I was super excited to go and do it. Quickly after that excitement, and quickly after the luster of a new and increased paycheck came across, I realized that this was not my passion. This was not where I wanted to be. This is not an industry that I felt compelled to be excited about and a part of, and I had to make some change quickly, too. So, guess what? I went back into coffee. That's right. This was a little bit of a different role inside of coffee, where I went to work for the Specialty Coffee Association for 4 years, where I got to meet great people like Monsi, Lily, several others that are still part of that organization too, where I got to really cement my relationships with many of the people in this room, like Mr. Lucy, and really be active and engaged in barista events, in competitions, barista camp, a lot of great experiences that I have with the Specialty Coffee Association. Although I was in the Specialty Coffee Association and in coffee, I wasn't working with coffee every day. So 4 years later, at that point, I was offered an opportunity to return to coffee with a roaster in St. Louis called Kaldi's Coffee. So we're on a similar path here, back working mostly with retail teams, helping support those teams, helping them grow in newly acquired markets as well, too. 2 years into that job, guess what? I was blessed enough to be able to have another opportunity to go into another part of coffee in a marketing function. I went to work for Espresso Supply and Boni in Seattle, where I was their head of marketing. So really learning a new discipline inside of specialty coffee, working with different types of products, working with coffee brewers, and really getting to know what consumers were looking for and really to be able to market to them too. Taking my life in a somewhat different direction, although still very much close to the community that I'm a part of today. At that point, and just a year later, guess what? I'm going to take a hop back, and I returned to Intelligentsia Coffee too. I was given an opportunity to return to Intelligentsia as their head of retail, a position that I hold today and that I'm very proud of to hold today too. And really, where is my future going? Who knows at this point? I could quickly just drop out and go ahead and take up that lucrative tap career that I've always been really excited to do. But we see that my path is very different than my family's path, very different from my mother and father. This is my own path, though. I've carved out this path for me, too. And let's talk about some of my goals, then, too. I think that a lot of us in this room can attest to the fact that one of our career goals should be and will be that it's a job that we're really happy to do. This almost becomes a non-negotiable. This is something that we want to be able to come to work every day and enjoy what we're doing, and enjoy the team that we work with, and enjoy the activity and the people that we serve every day. If this isn't something that we find and that we really enjoy every day, then it's likely that we'll move on because it becomes something that's so important to us. I'm going to refer back to some of parts of this kind of crazy path that I've drawn just to kind of see where I was at and what some of those outcomes were with that too. We're also really open to wearing many hats. Learning new disciplines, be excited to be challenged in different ways, I think is really important and is certainly important to myself too. Something bigger than us. This should be something that serves a community or serves a larger group. We're making an impact on a daily basis, and it's something that we're really proud to do. And again, we're taking away home much more than a paycheck. And as I grow into my 30s, late 30s, as the gray hair continues to grow too, something that's become very important to myself is my legacy. What contribution am I making? What will I be known for? Both here today, next year, years from now, and when I'm no longer here, what will my legacy look like and what will I be known for? So, guess what, guys? Career paths have definitely changed. You can see the parents, and then we can see the mess of my own then too. So it's pretty interesting. I also think it's important to mention that this is my own path. Again, this is the path that I've carved. And I'm being a little vulnerable here and talking about that a little bit with you because it's mine and I own it. And I should be pretty excited about that too. But what this new path demonstrates is that no one's is going to be exactly the same as this great specific line then too. We should really embrace the change of what new careers look like in our modern day workplace. There's a few things about organizations that I also think that we should adopt and we should understand and just really reflect on. Organizations have changed. They're flat, they're lean, there's no longer these giant departments, there's no longer groups and groups and groups of people. Organizations are expected to move quickly, and non-lean organizations tend to kind of slow things down and not move at a quicker pace. The free agent mindset, we're not tied to different retirement plans or different pensions. We have the ability to kind of pick up and go as needed. And so organizations really should start responding and reflecting on that too. There's also now, especially in times of great economic prosperity, there's the own agent opportunity where maybe you have found a funder or you've saved up money over time or you've borrowed from family and are able to go out on your own on a much easier level and quicker than ever before in the past too. Our organizations are definitely much more goals and results driven, and they recognize people achieving those goals and achieving the results. Versus seniority. In the past, it was typically the next person in line would get the advancement. The next person in line would get the new role. Whereas today, it's really based off of your contribution into the organization and being recognized for that too. So again, let's make your own path. Remember that it's no longer this typical path. Although my path might be a little bit crazy, yours may not be as crazy. And also remember that many of those messy paths can also end up being very rewarding as well too. And so what I'd like to really do is identify some great areas and some great milestones or turning points, particularly in my career, but also what I think would be relevant today inside of the specialty coffee industry, and hopefully outside of the specialty coffee industry too. We're going to talk about some of my challenges and also some of my opportunities that I have foreseen inside of specialty coffee, and even some of my mistakes and what I do with those too. We're going to start with identifying companies that you want to work for. And I think this is the natural starting point in any discovery of whether it's an industry or it's a company too. I've had the great pleasure of both being introduced to a new company and rejoining a company too. And that's been inside of coffee and outside of coffee too. And so I've identified some key things based off of my experience that I think are pretty helpful in what I identify into when I want to look at a company as a prospect to join them. Shared values is extremely important, whether that's what they put on their website or put up in their store or what have you, or whether it's what you perceive from your engagement with their team and people that you know, or even just having a friendly conversation. Those values can come across pretty nice. A special experience. I've looked at so many cases of the jobs that I've taken where I've had an experience with that company and with that brand, and noticed something unique and different about them, and it became something I clearly wanted to be a part of too. I've also asked myself what potential exists inside of this organization. Maybe it might be deemed that I would have more experience than what this organization could afford or could entertain at this time. But it's in those moments where I've thought, what can I bring into this company? How can I contribute to this organization? And how could I potentially take them to the next level? How could I expose them to something different and unique? Again, what could my contributions to this company be? That doesn't always make it the most obvious company that you would join, but it's when you kind of find those unique companies that are poised for good success in the future and being able to identify what your role is in that too. And really, again, going back to some of my goals that I have, a key important one for me is that do they serve a greater purpose? What is their mission statement? Are they helping to fulfill or contribute to that mission statement too? And how can I be a part of that? How can I be a part of that community too? Think also about the roles that you want and the roles that you're willing to do. And this is a key one for me, that you can really kind of look at yourself, look at the role that you're applying for, verify that you can be happy inside of that role from what it is today. Try not to put yourself in a position where you're going to be fighting against something like that, where you're going to come in every day frustrated or really not wanting to do something inside of that role. And then also envision what roles could be down the road for you, whether it's something that is obvious or already present in the organization, or it might be something that isn't there today. What roles could you really see coming from that, and at what level? And then be a part of that development over time. Recognize when some of those skills that you might have yourself could start to come up inside the company. Raise your hand and being able to identify what those opportunities are too. Also, be honest with yourself here. Don't sign yourself up for misery. Don't go into a sales position if you hate sales. Don't go into an accounting position if you really hate math. That's just not setting yourself up to be successful. That applies also when you're working inside of a company. Don't apply for those positions or those opportunities that exist and you just want to advance. If you're going to advance into a position that you don't want to do, it's likely going to end up in failure too, and you won't be happy inside of that role. And think about really how you're wired. Just a conversation that we were having, Muncie and Todd, having earlier around thinking about how you yourself are wired. There's many kind of personality tests that are out there, and some of them might already be introduced into your companies. But think about what you contribute and then how that can align to the position that you're applying for and the position that you're hoping to get. Do your homework on the company, but also do the homework on yourself. And this is a key point for me too. When I've realized I've prepped myself for the interview, when I've gone into this interview having all of my facts and figures or background on the company and things that I feel that they want to hear, possibly even some trigger words based off of their mission statement or what have you, I also want to make sure that I am bringing my own true self into that interview. I want to make sure that there is a key understanding of why I'm curious about this organization, why I'm being drawn into this interview, and I'm dating myself here, but why I filled out that application, or why I got excited about even just walking in those doors too. I want to bring that to the interview. And so many times in my history of hiring at Intelligentsia, at Kaldi's, at other roles, I ask that question, why us? Why do you want to be here? I'm looking for that curious factor. I'm looking for you to be able to say something that is just beyond what you see from us from a face value, and how you see yourself in that role in that company too. Great. So the interview went great. You guys are really excited. You've got day one onboarding. You've landed this job. Now you have to really commit to the job too. Put your heads down, do the work that's in front of you right there, and be present, like we've already talked about today. Really being present in the role, in the skills that you're learning on a daily basis, in the product that you're delivering, in the service that you're giving. Be present inside of that. Don't fight against that. And make it personal. Also, have some fun with it. I mean, be silly, have a good time with your coworkers, have a great time with your customers. We have such an opportunity inside of Specialty Coffee, and sorry team for saying this again, but we see our customers more than they see their families in a lot of cases. And inside of Specialty Coffee, that makes it pretty unique and interesting. So have fun with that. Get to know our customers with the specialness and the special hands that you're able to inside of coffee. And build that problem-solving muscle. When you are faced with a problem, take those opportunities not to just look elsewhere for answers, but come up with answers and options on your own too. Be excited about the fact of, I don't know, but I'm willing to figure it out. And ask yourself every day, what contribution am I going to make? How am I contributing into this organization? Guess what, guys? You're going to encounter some hardships. And guess what? It sucks. It really sucks. I mean, I can think of the countless times that I've had where I've literally just had to say those words out loud. Oh my God, this sucks. Whether it's in the car ride on the way home, whether it's picking up the phone and talking to your spouse or partner or what have you, sometimes you just have to say that. Sometimes you just want to get that out, that my day sucked. This wasn't fun. Everyone's going through that, and you should really just embrace that too, and embrace those days. It's oftentimes when we come into these moments where there is a risk associated with that, or you're really scared or have this fear of failure that surrounds that too. And a lot of those moments is when we feel like this sucks. There's something in front of me. There's this experience that I'm having right now that I'm not happy with. How do you just let that in? How do you just embrace that for what it is and not try to push it away or diminish it or anything like that, but really just embrace it for what it is. Own it, and then start to move forward from there too. You guys also there is a lot of pressure inside of the workplace today too. We're expected to move faster. We don't have a ton of support in a lot of cases. Maybe our managers are distracted or working on something else too, and so they're not able to give us a lot of development feedback or guidance. And in a lot of circumstances, just all that pressure can really bring you to that boiling point of, man, this sucked, or this day sucked, or this project sucked. How can I move on from that too? I have to recognize too that over the period of my career, and particularly in the teams that I've had the pleasure of working with, the best and the brightest really, really turn into these moments. They don't walk away from them. They don't not take ownership of them. They turn in and they get excited about this being a new opportunity for them too. And so find those opportunities. I have another policy of mine where I try to say, rather than this sucks or this is awful, I say, that's weird. That's weird. I don't know. I don't know why that happened, but let's try to figure it out then too. Try to find those opportunities to do that. And also something that I personally endeavor for today, and I hear a lot of, is work-life balance. And I think oftentimes we'll look at that from a very short-term capacity, and I encourage us, and something that I've learned over time really to do, is look at that from a long-term perspective. Some of the short-term sacrifices that I might make here with this role or with this position might mean long-term work-life balance at a later point then too. So find those opportunities and really work in them too. At some point, you may identify that, as I have very much, that change might be necessary too. And that's important that you really embrace that. In a lot of those points in my life, I've been lucky. I've been lucky to know that change came upon me or change was necessary, and I was able to move on to another opportunity that I was excited about. Not everybody has that chance, though. Not everybody is that lucky. But the key thing that I go into here is that change sometimes is necessary. And if you come to that point, really start that with dialogue, both internal and external. Start those conversations early. Start those with honesty and trust in yourself and trust into the goals that you've identified. Know that you're clear in your understanding of what's important to you and that those become your non-negotiables and it's what you're working towards. In all of my experience, when I've decided or been offered an opportunity where change was going to happen, I always started that with a very healthy dialogue. And it's proven well, not only in how my life transitioned at that point, but more importantly, the friendships that I kept and the relationships that I kept in those companies and inside of those businesses too. I mean, look at me. I'm already back at 2 companies then too. So there's a really healthy way to do this too. So you can see, again, I'm a good example of when sometimes change might be necessary. And also, again, remember that sometimes, like we've already mentioned, things fall apart. But we can also recognize, too, like I've mentioned, where it is important to be friends with your ex. Good old K-Fed. He's always there for those kids. But it is important. It is important that we recognize that, and again, I've had some great experiences with this, where not only have I maintained some great relationships throughout my time and throughout my career, but also I've been able to return back to some of those companies based off of my commitment, my work, and just maintaining a great relationship too. And also, coffee is a small sandbox. I mean, again, I know so many people in this room. We all talk to one another. We all engage with one another, so it's important to keep those relationships really intact too. Something that has been talked about today quite a bit is also leadership. And I think it's really important in both my role as a manager and parts of those legacy points that we've discussed is seeking out those opportunities to be leaders. Whether it could be in a peer-to-peer relationship, whether it's even with the opportunity to manage up and be a leader amongst your team to other supervisors or other managers. Regardless of that role, find those opportunities to be a leader. It will demonstrate so much in both your ethic as well as really being able to bring a team together, and I think that's really important. Leadership also comes with engaging with your community, engaging inside of the BGA, engaging with people inside of this room, engaging with coffee shops that don't want anything to do with the BGA or the SCAA too. Really reaching out to them and engaging with them. Asking them the challenges that they're having, how can you be helpful, how can you be a friend at those points too. And again, like I've mentioned, I look to many folks in this room really based off of the relationships that I've had. I'm excited to say that this is a part of it in all circumstances, particularly you, Mr. Lucy. So, in closing, let's remind ourselves and embrace the fact that success in your path is completely up to you. This is your path to define. This is your path to draw. It could be linear and straightforward. It could be a crazy, hairy mess like mine, but it is most definitely your path. And no one draws this for you but yourselves too. So make sure that you own that and be excited about it too. And really, I'd like to ask you guys, how will you define your path? Also, go Cubs.